Welcome to People and Cloud Native Data Management, Change in Roles. I'm honored to be a speaker here today to share my insights and experience that I've gained in the backup and recovery industry. My name is Demetrius Malbrough, and I'm currently host of the Data Protection Gumbo podcast, reaching up to 22,000 backup recovery and storage professionals on a weekly basis. I'm also a technical product marketing manager at Puppet, which is in the IT automation space. And I've been in the backup and recovery industry for about 21 years now as a deep technical expert, leader, and also product marketer. I invite you to take a short 20-minute virtual journey with me. It will be similar in theory to the one led by the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly travels up to 2,800 miles on its migration from the United States and Canada to the central Mexican forest. And on our first stop, we will pause and reflect on some of the uncertainties that 2020 has rained down upon us this year, and how invisible boulders cloud our thinking as we move closer to the new world of work and finally landing in the zone of continuous learning. What have you been through in 2020? I myself have been through some pretty significant changes this year. From leaving the backup industry and venturing out into the new world of IT automation, my wife losing her job due to the pandemic, decision that we made to raise two more little girls after my wife and I decided only to have one more girl in the house and to become empty nesters in May of next year. And I can sum this up in the famous words of Mike Tyson, one of the best heavyweight boxers of all time. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, 2020 has definitely punched us all in the mouth with lots of uncertainty. I mean, it's everywhere. From the first case of coronavirus from a man returning from China in late January, the mandates to social distancing and quarantining in place, to the political and civil unrest, the deep swings in our global economy, to the rise of cyber attacks. When will COVID-19 be behind us? When will we have a vaccine? Who will make the vaccine? Within our technology bubble, there is a lot of confusion as well, especially around the term cloud native. And there was a recent survey by software maker Lightbin of 1,000 developers and IT decision makers, and they found that around 42% of respondents ranked writing applications that specifically leverage underlying cloud infrastructure as the most important aspect of cloud native. But a majority picked the other two options. Utilizing Kubernetes and containers, that was about 35% of respondents, or moving to a cloud infrastructure provider, which came in at 23%. And so there are a lot of things that we can't see. And right now, in this time, in this moment of the pandemic and the coronavirus and COVID-19 that we're dealing with, backup recovery and storage professionals have been introduced to a lot of new and emerging technologies. And I'm sure if they've embraced them, or are they just more reactive toward the day-to-day responsibilities of managing backups? And so right now, there's a lot of things that are on the mind of backup and recovery and storage professionals. I've been fortunate enough to speak with numerous C-suite executives, from founders to CIOs and corporate data leaders, through my podcast and also through my backup and recovery professionals group on LinkedIn. And I've seen several invisible boulders that are clouding the mind of backup and recovery and storage professionals today. And I also feel that it affects other people and professions in the IT industry as well. But what are invisible boulders? Invisible boulders are those new and emerging technology trends that enter our small world of expertise and challenge us to either ignore them or embrace them. We see them, we hear about them, we read about them in blog posts, we even hear them on podcasts. We hear our managers talking about them in the virtual hallways of Zoom, but yet we shrug them off because we're so overwhelmed just by life right now. And in this new normal that the pandemic has enclosed us all in. But I see three invisible boulders hovering over backup, recovery, and storage professionals right now. The first one is the shift to cloud native and embracing microservices and containers like Kubernetes and Docker. Backup, recovery, and storage professionals are still comfortable in their data protection cocoons and still on the fence whether or not to uplevel their skills. Backup administrators that are still consumed within the software, like IBM Spectrum Protect, Veeam, Veritas Net Backup, EMC Networker, Rubrik, Cohesity. Take these current backup skills and use these as a springboard to add new skills in cloud native, infrastructure as code, CI/CD pipeline, and even security. And thirdly, the pandemic has led to a convergence of roles, especially in backup recovery in the storage industries. And in some cases, the majority of pure backup roles have even moved offshore. And if you Google backup administrators, most of those jobs are now run by managed service providers. And so the shift to cloud native technologies, infrastructure as code, and the automation and orchestration of workflows are top of mind for many CIOs and CEOs right now. The pandemic has forced them to rethink how to tap into the efficiencies of scale and minimizing cost as you move from traditional and legacy platforms to more modern ones, and putting in place repeatable, transparent, and consistent models. And if you think of data management, let's say Kubernetes, like backup and restore, application mobility, and disaster recovery, you need to have policies to automate these workflows with snapshotting capabilities to protect the entire application stack. And on the security side, going a little deeper with role-based access control and self-service to make sure your knowledge is deeper and your understanding is solid when having conversations with the security team or even the cloud team. There's a shift that's happening right now in the IT industry, and it's accelerating. And as more and more individuals continue to lose their jobs due to this pandemic, these skill sets will deem you more qualified and more diverse for some of these new positions. And these are the ones that I'm seeing out there right now. If you are a current backup and storage professional at the moment, you may want to reconsider getting that AWS, that GCP, or that Azure certification that you've been contemplating for the last few months. The second invisible boulder is the delayed transformation in skills. And I remember when I was a backup administrator back in the early 2000s, and I considered myself a TSM expert. I remember being consumed in my little Tivoli storage manager bubble with learning all of the commands to configure and run a tape library, how to zone the tape drives and partition a tape library. And I felt pretty confident that this was going to be the way backup would remain for the next 10 to 15 years. I was so comfortable that I didn't necessarily pay attention to some of the newer technologies that were starting to pop up during that time. And this is when I started getting stagnant in my career. And I began to feel as if I was getting left behind. The outsourcing of backup roles were just starting to accelerate back then. But now managed service providers are quickly creating as a service offerings like backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service with self-service portals to allow users to perform their own backups and restores whenever they need to. I remember having a conversation with the storage administrator from my backup and recovery professionals LinkedIn group a few months ago. He had recently lost his job due to the pandemic. And I remember him saying that he was afraid that he would never find another job in the backup and storage industry and that he was being forced to go out and get certified in AWS and some other public cloud providers. I had another conversation with him a month later. And he said, there are so many qualified experts all applying for the same jobs that he feels forced to differentiate himself by getting more skills in the cloud and even getting certified. So he was so comfortable and unmotivated in his current position and didn't feel that sense of urgency. And losing his job actually forced him to move in the right direction. And the third invisible boulder that I am seeing is the convergence in the backup and storage role. There is a data protection innovation awakening happening right now. A new way of protecting Kubernetes clusters. And when an application moves from one machine to another, is that backup software capable of having the intelligence and knowledge to know where that information sits and how it can protect that information because it has moved? There is a lot happening right now with cybersecurity threats, ransomware, and even from a compliance and regulation perspective and data classification. A backup and storage administrator now has to know even more about the business. What are the underlying data protection mandates at a global scale? And how do you protect all of the different critical applications? Whether it's email, whether it's an open source database, or whether it's a custom business application. How does that affect the overall business? And so I see these moving more into IT generalist roles, and that these roles are converging with cloud roles, with more data roles. So backup administrators, take those skills and utilize those skills to actually continue to catapult yourself to gaining a seat at the table. You already know the entire layout of the data center better than anyone else. So there is a new world of work and a new shift that's happening right now. And as we move into a new cycle, where as a backup and storage administrator, you will have to continuously learn and shift as the technology is shifting. It's happening faster and faster. Moore's Law may not be Moore's Law anymore. I see technology changing and shifting a lot faster. And as a backup and storage administrator, you are responsible for understanding what those changes are. So you can have a seat at the table and understand the effects of cloud native technologies, public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud, and how these are affecting the way that data is being backed up and protected. And not to mention across the world, in moving data from one location to the other, from compliance and regulations perspectives. But continuous learning gives you the key to unlock your own learning potential. The goal is equipping you as a backup and storage administrator to win at the new world of work, which will provide you and your company a competitive advantage. Because there's a lot of changing human attitudes right now, a lot of human behaviors that are changing around data, because we're in a data-driven world. And you should be more focused on implementing self-service portals instead of being more in a reactive mode of working tickets and working backups as backups have failed or a storage array has failed. You should focus more on multi-cloud versus on-premises and capital expenditures. And not to say that those things are not important, but yet, as I keep saying, is that there's a shift that's happening. And learning the details and intricacies about all of the different public cloud providers, that's where it's at. What are the characteristics of those? What does it take to protect data in each one of them? Should you get certified? Maybe. I say yes. Expand your security knowledge. And as I mentioned earlier, the rise of ransomware attacks is happening. They're occurring every 14 seconds now. It's no longer a matter of if, it's a matter of when a ransomware attack will happen in your environment. And so the storage and backup administrator of tomorrow will be highly skilled in self-service, will be more skilled in automation, will know more about multi-cloud, will have a deeper understanding and skills in cybersecurity, and all of the different components in securing data inside and outside of the perimeter. You should also learn about scripting and coding because we are moving more toward an automation-driven world. And as companies scale from hundreds to thousands of systems, sometimes hundreds of thousands of systems, it's no longer a manual effort. It's an automated effort. Take that even further to artificial intelligence or machine learning. That capability will need to be woven into the very core of scalability, and not to mention agility and the elasticity that cloud brings today. But what's over the hill? That next time the technology innovations occur that will disrupt the current way of running critical business workloads, it's right over the horizon. But as a storage and a backup administrator, can you afford to just sit back and continue to only learn about the software that you're dealing with, that backup technology or that storage technology, no, can't afford to do that anymore. Raise your head up, peek above the horizon, and begin to understand, learn, read. Get involved in those conversations with your peers around Docker and Kubernetes. Learn those technologies, understand them. Get involved in those projects. Because the emergence of new data roles are upon us. We're already there. And staying nimble means that artificial intelligence and data science will be the new normal. Because there's a proliferation happening right now as we speak of new startup companies emerging in these areas. And these technologies are implanting themselves across all of our careers and our daily lives. And LinkedIn did a study of some of the fastest growing roles in 2019. And they observed that the requirement to learn new skills, it's no longer about keeping up to date in your existing role. It's actually preparing for the new world of work. And so begin to see that these new roles are emerging, like data analysts, data engineers, machine learning engineers, and data scientists. So that backup and recovery and that storage role that you're in right now, 5 years from now, that title may not be that title. And so if you were just so involved in learning and knowing what you currently know now, then you might not have an opportunity to participate in these new roles, in this new world of work that we're in. And so in closure, I would like to leave you with a question. The question is, are you satisfied with your current skill set, with your current knowledge, that you're not motivated to see what's above the horizon, to raise your hand, jump in, volunteer for that new project, grasp those new technologies? You're not just a backup and storage administrator or a cloud engineer anymore. You're all of the above. Thank you for your time today. And if there are any additional questions, I'll be glad to address them. Thank you.